On today's program, Tez Anderson, civil rights advocate and longtime HIV survivor. Several years ago, after seeing a great need for networking and support among longtime HIV/AIDS survivors, Tez founded Let's Kick Ass as a way for people to connect more with each other. He wanted to create levity for what he refers to as AIDS survivor syndrome. Along the way, the organization has grown considerably with several chapters beyond just the initial San Francisco outing. Recently, Tez was voted one of the most 75 inspiring people living with HIV. Tez talks to us about what it means to not only live with HIV, but to thrive. Tez, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here in another episode of Mystics in a Chat Room Conversations with Agents of Change. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. It's an exciting program you have.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good, and I love your shirt. It's awesome.
Thank you. You can buy them online.
You can buy them online. Everyone look across your screen, and you can buy them online. I think I have a little bit of a candle glow going on, which I kind of dig. I'm going to keep it there, so, when all else fails, just carry a candle around, and, don't blow. I wanted this robust scent to fill the room, and the next thing I know, I'm like, it's emanating up. So anyway, it's really great to connect with you. I've been following your work for many years. This year I wrote about Let's Kick Ass Palm Springs, the Palm Springs chapter, and we connected briefly about that, and I learned all sorts of other things. So I thought it'd be great to and inspiring to have you on this show. So it's great to talk to you. Well, and there's so many things I want to touch base upon and talk to you about. But let's start with the obvious. You are considered a hero in the efforts to raise awareness about HIV and AIDS and its emotional ripple effects. And I'm wondering, when you hear that, how does that feel? Do you consider yourself somebody who is a hero in that realm?
Hero makes me squirm a little bit because it puts me in a pantheon of people that I respect and admire. I just consider myself a guy that lived through something that I didn't have a name for or knew what it was. I just thought I was going crazy. And I just did what I've always done, which is, once I understood what was going on with it, I began sharing that with other people. And it's just kind of grown very organically. So I don't feel like a hero. There's so many amazing people in the field of, long-term survivors and doing this work. But it's very nice to hear. It's just, I blushed a little bit because I don't know, I just don't think of myself as a hero. But
you're humble. It's a cool thing. That's a cool thing.
No, I mean, I do what I do because it's my passion.
Right.
And because I felt like I stumbled upon something. So it wasn't like it was some big design. It was just that I lived so long and had so many questions about what was going on around me and life, because at some point in my life, after about 25 years of living with HIV, I have been living with HIV since 1983. So the idea that at 58 I'm sitting here having a Skype chat with you still blows my mind a little bit, because it was not in the cards. I was supposed to die. And when I found out that I was positive, the test came back and it said you're positive, and the doctor said, you have less than 2 years to live. At that point, I was 26, because I found out 3 years later. I thought, I'll never live to see 30.
Wow.
So I didn't make plans to be an old person, a person aging with HIV.
Right.
I made plans to be dead.
Right. You said something along the lines of, you prepared well to die, but not to live. Right.
Exactly. That's the essence of Let's Kick Ass, is because a lot of other people, turns out, made the same plans. And none of us were talking to each other about it at that time. And I thought, we need to change that. And as I say, when I say organic, I mean, it started out as me talking to one friend first. He said, "Oh my God, something similar happened to me." And then the more I talked to people, we started doing a coffee every Thursday at a cafe here, and the group grew and grew and grew. And then I sort of said, "Well, we need to do a town hall on this." So I called up some people that I worked with before and knew, some people I didn't know, and said, "Let's do a town hall. Let's put on Mickey and Judy. Let's put on a show." Um, and we did that at the LGBT Center in 2013, September, and nearly 250 people came.
Wow. Wow. That's brilliant. I want to get into all of that in more detail. But let's back up. Let's back up, and I want you to maybe share, if you can. It's so inspiring to talk to you. Get the synapses in my brain are all clicking. I have so many ideas. But so can you talk a little bit about what your journey was, what that was like growing up in Georgia? How was that for you?
Um, Georgia is a good place to be from. By that I mean I was precocious. I was a gay kid, young. I didn't know. I didn't have a word for it for the longest time. But at about 13, because I was an average reader, I loved to read, and my mother would drop me off at the city library, the little town library that we had, and I would just spend the day looking at reading books. Well, when I started becoming sexually aware, I went to shaking. I was just shaking. I went to the card catalog and looked up sex, and Joy of Sex came up, and I looked up homosexuality in it. And it was like, oh my God, this is a perversion. Because it was still considered that. This is 1973 or 4. So I was like, close that book, close that down. And
Did it scare you, like the definition that you read?
yeah, because I thought, oh my God, this is how people perceive us, perceive me. And because I also felt like a fish out of water there. I mean, I was the kid who didn't like to play sports, who loved reading, who was better at English than I was at mathematics.
Me too.
Just all this, exactly. It's a gay thing, I think.
Ah.
But I just didn't feel like I fit in. I used to have these dreams that my real parents were going to fly in on a magic carpet and take me back to my real family somewhere else. Because as much as I love my family, I didn't feel like I belonged there.
Right. I think a lot of us can relate to something like that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's that sense of being an outsider, all along.
Wow. So that you came to you came to San Francisco when you were what, 25, 26?
26 is when I moved here. Yeah.
Right.
I visited before that, but yeah. What happened was my father kicked me out of the house when I was about nearly 18 because he asked me, "Are you queer or what?" And I had seen enough Phil Donahue in those days to say, "Well, we don't call it queer, Dad. I'm a gay man." And then he pounded his hand on the table and said, "I will not put up with that in this house." And I said, "Okay, bye." And I went upstairs and packed my stuff and left.
Well, you just left. Wow.
Just left. Yeah. And that was kind of an amazingly great thing that I did because I knew gay people in Atlanta by that time. I had been going to gay bars since I was 16. And I had a boyfriend at the time. And it was just kind of like sort of meant to be looking back on it. It was scary as hell at first. I thought,
sure, yeah.
I would be homeless. But a friend had a friend who needed a roommate, and it just worked out really well. And it established for me a sense of independence very early on. And then I was working at these menial jobs, one company, but different jobs. They kept promoting me. Then they asked me if I wanted to take a transfer to New York. This was in 82 or 83. And I said, sure, I've never been to New York, and it was always my dream to escape to either New York or LA because those are the exotic cities to me. So I took the transfer, went to New York, lived there for a year, made some amazing friends, and my best friend at the time, who became a best friend, Rocco Laraya,
Great
said,
name.
"Yeah, he's everything you expect Rocco Laraya to be. You know, he was that total thing."
Yeah.
And he said, come meet me at the Monster for Gay Pride Day." And I was like, I don't know if I care, Rocco. He's like, meet me at the effing parade. And I was like, okay, okay. And I got off the train at Sheridan Square, and there were all these gay people. And I was like, oh my Lord, this is possible. And I started to cry. I had as close as an atheist can get to a religious experience. It was a real epiphany to me that I didn't need to not be out. And on that spot in Sheridan Square, of all places, I decided when I go back to Atlanta, because I was going to go back to Atlanta to go to school, college, because I didn't go to college before that. And I decided I was going to become a gay rights activist.
Just right there. You just knew, huh?
Yeah, I just knew that going back to Atlanta and being the little bar bunny that I wasn't enough.
Wow. Wow.
I don't know where that came from. I was always rooting for the underdog, I guess. Just as a child, I was always defending people who were being bullied or whatever it was. So it was just a kind of a natural thing for me to think I'm going to be an activist.
And then
So
California came into the picture, and
I moved back to Atlanta, spent about a year there, and I was the president of the Gay Student. I started the Gay Student Alliance at Georgia State University. I started a nonprofit. I wrote for the gay newspaper.
right.
I did something for gay cable television, which was like this um, public access cable television show about gay folks. I was a reporter. Um,
Nice.
I interviewed James Curran at the CDC. I did an expose in the bathhouses. I've not seen it since then, so I never want to. I was just like terrified guy in a cheap polyester suit, like, eh. But,
Polyester.
and so I asked around about getting a speaker to come to our speakers bureau, and I asked a lot of friends, mentors, who should I get biggest crowd? And they told me the same name, came back to me again and again and again. And that was Armistead Maupin, the writer of Tales of the City.
Right.
I had not read Tales of the City. I did not know him. But in those days, he was listed in the phone book. So
You called him?
I called him. And I said, Mr. Maupin, my name is Tez Anderson. And long story short, he came. And shortly, I picked him up at the airport, and we went back to his hotel room so I could make sure he was settled because I was being a good Southern host. And we ended up in bed together.
And how was that? Well, you don't have to go into detail, but
It was very unexpected, but what was amazing about it was that I felt for the first time that I found someone who understood my insistence about people being out of the closet, being open about the sexuality. And mind you, I was in a place in Atlanta where that was not really looked upon as something worthwhile. There was a handful of activists in those days, but it was really important to me to be out. And he just connected emotionally, mentally. We had a great conversation. And that went on for 4 days. I mean, he was there to give a talk and had to get up in front of an audience and introduce our guest speaker. I know I was blushing. But we started writing letters for email and telephone calls, and we sort of fell in love on the phone. So I moved here in '86 to be with him.
so you moved here in '86,
Yeah.
but shortly after that is when you were tested positive for HIV, correct? Right.
Well, because he had already been tested and knew that he was HIV negative. And after I was in San Francisco for a month, I walked 4 blocks down Noe Street. I'm pointing in that direction. That's where I am now. Um, Walked down the street to the clinic at 17th in San Francisco. Took the test. Waited 2 weeks because in those days there was no
Right.
was an instant. Um, and I came back into the room, and the woman said, after 2 weeks, she said, "How would you feel if it came back positive?" And it just hit me like a thunderbolt. I mean, that's all I remember her saying. I also remember thinking, I have to get out of here. I just sort of like thanked her and got out. When I came back outside, the same street that I just walked down, it was like Dorothy in Wizard of Oz. It felt like it wasn't black and white, it was just kind of bland colors. But when I came back out, everything had turned to Technicolor. It was like trees were electric green, the sky was bright blue, birds were chirping louder. There was a fiddle growing on the staircase near the house where we lived. Fiddle's a green leaf, and it was so vivid green. And I just thought, wow, because I knew something life changing had just happened, but I hadn't taken it in yet. So I went upstairs and told him, I said, "This is your chance to get out of this if you want to. I understand." And he's like, "Nope, I love you. I'm in." And so about 2 weeks later, I saw Marcus Conant, famous doctor from, and the band played on and all that stuff. It's an early AIDS doc. So I saw Marcus, and he said, "It means you have 18 to 24 months to live."
So what went through your mind when that information came to you?
A few things. One of them was, okay, well, there goes all my hopes and dreams. Why should I go back to college to get my degree? Dead people don't need degrees. And it, had the opposite effect so some people find out something terminal and they always wanted to go skydiving or climb Mount Everest or whatever. I had the kind of opposite effect. I was like, life is pretty good. Just try and live each day fully and
Mm-hmm.
don't shoot too far because you don't have that much time left. 2 years, and that's what I did. I did that for 10 years. I mean, I go back every 2 years and he'd say 2 more years, 2 more years.
That, back, in the 80s and 90s, when people discovered that they were HIV positive, I mean, obviously that time, living on the edge like that, being told that information, well, okay, you have maybe 18 months, 2 years, whatever. Um, obviously very unsettling. Yes.
Oh, totally, yeah. Especially for a young person. I was 26, so
Yeah.
yeah.
So and you can't really. It's challenging to get into the mindset of planning, like, okay, 10 years, 15 years down the road when somebody is telling you. So I imagine there was a sense of isolation. Did you talk to other people about it much, like even your close friends, or?
Yeah, I talked to everybody.
Yeah.
I talked to the world. What was also happening concurrent with that is that I was beginning to lose my friends from Atlanta. They were dying out one by one. I mean, I was meeting people in San Francisco who were starting to die. And you see somebody walking down Castro Street one week and they look healthy, and then a few weeks later they'd be sort of, something was off, sick, gaunt, whatever it was. Then they'd be in a walker or wheelchair, and then they'd be dead. So it was like being dropped into a war zone. It felt very much like this is all around me. And because I told everybody, including my mother and my best friend, and I told everybody I could tell. I just decided to be open about it because I never had any shame around HIV. I figured if I wouldn't be ashamed of getting a cold, why would I be ashamed of having HIV?
Right.
I knew my sexual history. So it took some time for the news of fatality to kind of take root. And once it did, I do what I always do. I went back to my books. I started reading books on death and dying, and the Stephen Levine book, and all these books about dying, how to die consciously, and be a good dying guy. But what tripped me up many years later was that, because I had pneumocystis along the way, '94, and I had meningitis and all these various symptoms. My T cells dropped to 13
My
for
gosh.
for 7 years.
For 7 years.
Yeah, and I just knew that was. I mean, it was like the death clock, the ticker
Yeah.
going down.
So there you are, for that amount of time, 7 years with 13, with your T cells at 13 count. Um, yeah, I don't know how did you wrap your mind around that, and what got you through?
I just kind of just kept on going, because I started thinking, okay, a lot of these numbers that I've been told about how I'm living, what T cells are going to keep me alive, what's going to kill me, they're proving untrue for me. I couldn't say it for other people, but for me, living with 13 T cells seems to be improbable, especially for 7 years. Um, and I was also I started early. I was on AZT trial, the DD4, DDI, whatever came next. I was in all those trials in monotherapy. And each of those drugs had different side effects, some of which I live with now, like neuropathy. Um, but I just kind of made it to the next drug before I would become resistant to it.
Hmm.
Then the next drug, and then the next drug. So when combination therapy came out in '96, it was tricky to find a combination that would work to keep my viral load by that time. We didn't have much we had viral loads then, but we had ways of sort of telling if it was, working or not. And it was. So I've been on the same regimen for probably at this point, I don't know, 15 years.
Wow.
So, yeah, not many changes. But my viral load's undetectable and has been for 12 years.
I think that's amazing. What do there's hearing you speak and sharing your journey is really inspiring. But I also there's something going on right now where there's becoming more awareness about what undetectable really means. Undetectable equal untransmittable. So do you feel that there is still a huge misconception about being undetectable?
Yeah, I don't think people understand the life-changing implications of it. It is, for many years, a lot of people that I hung out with or knew, they got the biohazard tattoos, because their blood was biohazard, and that's not true anymore.
Yeah.
And yet, a lot of people, especially people of my generation, who maybe not keeping. I knew this information before, and I know Bruce Richmond, the guy that started U equals U and the whole campaign to get a consensus around it. But it was something I sort of knew about, because my doctor told me sort of unofficially. It's probably unlikely that you could pass it on. But then the partner study came out, all these studies came out, and showed that there's zero transmission if you're undetectable.
Right.
What that should do for us all is to liberate us. But I just think that some people feel distrustful of it, because, especially for older gay men, but even women, there are a lot of women in my group, it's this idea that we bought all these stories about these medications that turned out not to be true. We all the stuff we had expectations about didn't come true. So we're just a little bit jaded about sort of jumping on the bandwagon. But it's a bandwagon that I signed onto very early. I wish more people understood what that meant. What that means is you can have unprotected sex, because I forget how many did the partners study, but a lot, several thousand. All of them were serodiscordant. They didn't use condoms. They had unprotected, in those days, changed now, condomless sex, and no one got infected. So that's a lot of proof. It's also the second and third study now that really goes on to prove it.
Right.
But it's important that people understand that this is the point of. I came out of the closet before AIDS and HIV. So I was having sex without the fear. And what that did for me was open me up to a world and of humanity that I did not know existed. I mean, I could be in the diviest basement apartment, and I could also be one night, and then a few nights later, I could be in the penthouse of a lovely, gorgeous, rich person's home. So I got to see all of humanity. So I know what having intimate connections with people, even as intimate as just gay sex is, I have to have some intimacy. It just opened me up as a human. So for a long time, that wall came down. It was like condoms only, blah, 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 blah. Be careful. The person sitting beside you is dangerous. And it breeded a kind of sense of fear around people that I thought was a disservice not only to healthy sexuality, but to gay rights and to gay people's ability to be seen as people first. And so I don't know. It did not occur to me to not speak up about having HIV because I told everybody that would listen.
Right, right. So I find that absolutely intriguing, and what's going on right now, because there's a lot more awareness being generated now about um, being undetectable and untransmittable. There's like a big campaign lately that's going on. Um, can you talk about the inception of Let's Kick Ass? And when we say ass, we mean AIDS survivor syndrome. And can you maybe remind us a little bit about what that actually is? But yeah, talk about the inception of Let's Kick Ass and why that was important for you to step into, and AIDS survivor syndrome and what that is.
Well, obviously I'm an activist, so that was the first thing. But I went through a really rough period. I'm not even sure what years they were, or how long it lasted, because it was kind of a blur, a lot of it. But I remember telling a friend at the time that I felt like I was trying to catch a waterfall with my hands. My life had just was out of control. If I had been drinking or doing drugs, I would have gone to an AA meeting, I imagine. But there was no meeting for me because I wasn't an alcoholic or a drug addict. But I was having depression, and my depression got worse. I was becoming really anxious. I had panic attacks. I couldn't. I was becoming obsessed with suicide, and because looming in the back of my mind after about 25 years with HIV was this idea that, oh dear, I might be an old man with HIV, and I practiced dying. I did not practice living.
Hmm.
So that was scary. I kind of pushed it away, and you can't push those things away for too long.
No, because they'll come back up.
But you're really good at denial, better than I am. And so I got terrified about my prospects for the future. But I was also angry. I couldn't sleep. When I did sleep, I was having hideous nightmares. It wasn't until I was watching a television program one day about Iraqi war vets and PTSD that I thought, oh, those are all my symptoms.
Hmm.
So at that point, I became a detective. I began looking at, is it possible that this is because of HIV? I mean, I really kind of had a Homer Simpson, well, duh moment. Of course you have trauma. You lost well over 100 friends, maybe 200, I don't even know, but people that you knew and loved, and then a huge swaths of the community. The entire time, every time someone died, I thought, I'm next, I'm next, I'm next. That kind of stress has to take a toll on you.
Right.
So I began looking around. What is it called? What would you call this? Because I started telling other friends about my situation. I was like, I've just been through this thing. I think it's about the trauma. some of my old friends sort of dropped me because I was so angry to be around. I was kind of isolated in my own way, but I picked the phone up and called a friend who was a long-term survivor and said, "Here's what's going on for me." And he's just telling somebody. He said, "Oh my God, something similar happened to me." And then another person said something similar happened to me. And then we began meeting in the coffee shop once a week to discuss survival and what it meant to be a survivor. And that grew and grew and grew until it became we. Part of the story is important to know because of my suicidal ideation for such a long time. Around the time that we've been meeting for probably a year in coffee shops and talking about this, Spencer Cox, the activist in New York, died. We were Facebook friends. We were chatting one day. The next day, he was in the hospital. I think within 4 or 5 weeks, he was dead. And I was just scratching my head, like, how could he, of all people, who had all these ACT UP contacts and knew Larry Kramer, and he was one of the guys in ACT UP that was really important because he helped develop a protocol for protease inhibitors. How could he have died? Well, that's what everyone was asking. Well, I kind of figured out that I kind of had an idea, and then I found out that he had stopped taking his HIV meds.
Wow.
Several months before. And what that told me was that rather than putting a bag over his head or hanging himself, he killed himself by stop taking his meds because he knew full well the implications of that.
Wow.
And he had given up. And that had a big impact on me.
I bet. So much
so that I flew to New York. Couldn't afford it, but I flew to New York for his memorial. Just so I could be in the room and hear the stories. And I came back and I said, we've got to do something. So we started playing a town hall. It took months. But that's how it began. It began simply from a personal experience that other people were also having, and no one had a name for it. And I thought, I want something that's empowering to people. I don't want to just say AIDS survivor syndrome because that's another diagnosis. But to my mind, AIDS survivor syndrome describes it perfectly. It describes it as best I can describe it in a short way. So it happens to be that the acronym is ASS, which I have gotten some grief about. Like, oh, talk about our asses. And I always sort of say, well, I think it kind of depends on how you feel about your ass, but that's not for me to decide. So I was playing. I registered AIDSSurvivorSyndrome.org, and it was like so long and boring. And one day I was in the shower, and I was like, "This is not about diagnosing something. This is about helping people overcome it and deal with it, acknowledge it, and then start finding treatments or ways of moving through it." And I didn't know anything. I had no idea what I was doing. But I was in the shower one day, and I was like, "Ass, ass, ass, ass. Let's kick ass. Let's kick ass. Let's kick ass. Best works. Let's kick ass." So I went right into the computer, typed in, the URL to buy it on GoDaddy or whatever it was, and it was available.
And that was what year? That was 2013. 13. I thought 2012, 2013. 2013. Okay.
Yeah.
It's 4 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably the whole idea sort of started earlier than that. But we became an organization. The domain name was registered in 2013,
right?
And I had no idea that it would be what it has become at the time. I just thought it was a handful of us. Most of us had died, and because there's a meme in the world that says we lost an entire generation. Well, we lost a lot of generation. But me and my cohort, people that I see all the time online, in the streets, we survived. So we didn't all die.
That's right. That's right.
We're still here.
One of the things that I lifted from the website is that you wanted to help people realize that we have 20 or 30 more years of life. and we can make them the best years we can.
That's kind of what I'm trying to get to. I mean, I think so many of us have these shortened life expectancies. After you pass the mark of thinking maybe I'll live another 10 years, it's never about. My new thing is, let's all plan to live to be 100, and if we don't do it, we won't know it.
Good point, good distinction to make. It's true.
So better to plan for the long haul than plan for the short term, because then you're good Boy Scouts. You're well prepared.
Right. Right. So are you surprised? Now there's a chapter in Portland. There's a chapter in Palm Springs. Am I missing? There's a bunch of chapters.
Well, there's one smaller in Austin. There's one in New York that I've really very little to do with. We have an interest in one in Fort Lauderdale. There's one sort of semi one in Washington D.C.
Yeah.
Yeah, believe me, I was surprised that the town hall would turn into what it turned into. After about the third of session of town halls, a guy came down from Portland because he'd heard about what we were doing. And he's like, "We need this in Portland. Do you mind if I start a chapter?" And I was like, I liked the guy. And I said, "No, go for it." So
Nice.
it was never a grand scheme of mine to have chapters in other cities and do all this stuff. It's just all been kind of following what people were telling me. Because our first town hall, the one edict that I had for everybody that I asked to be a part of it was briefly tell your story and then listen. Talk to the audience. Let's take a lot of notes. So we took 20 pages of those giant Post-it notes from things that people were telling us in the audience. And that was invaluable information because it was not us telling them what they needed. It was them telling us what they needed. You understand?
Yeah.
It's like, here to serve you. How can we help you?
Right.
Not, and what do you need is a more important question.
Right.
And that's the one edict that I give everyone who starts a chapter is I was like, this is not about us telling folks what they need. This is about us doing the research first and asking our individual communities what it is they need. In San Francisco, housing's a big issue. But just things like that. So it was really about this idea that I wanted to give voice to the voiceless. I wanted people to be able to...
Wow, yeah. Voice to the voiceless.
Yeah, because they felt like they had been forgotten. I mean, suddenly in the 90s, HIV became a chronic manageable illness. It was no longer a death sentence. And that change was awesome in some ways, but for so long as a community of people, we had a galvanizing kind of sense of purpose and meaning. And once that lessened, and it was just a chronic manageable illness like diabetes, the urgency and the sense of community started to disintegrate a bit. And I've seen it disintegrate more and more over time. And as a result, people like myself, people who are older, started to feel like forgotten. They feel forgotten, they feel invisible, and then they retreat and they hide out, so they especially feel invisible.
And isolate, and withdraw, right.
Isolation is like the number one issue with long-term survivors. They don't want to participate. They don't want to go to loud bars. They don't want to make friends because they'll die or whatever it is. But we found that we could do the opposite. What we learned over the first few months, we did a survey after 8 months of having monthly town halls, was that we have data that shows that people's depression, their isolation, their social engagement all improved just by meeting and being in the same room with people who understood what their experience was. We didn't have to explain it to somebody who did not live through it. We all got that we could make jokes about diarrhea or talk about our stories of, neuropathy or exhaustion or whatever it was. And everyone in the room would be like, yeah, me too.
Right. So what do you love most about all of this and what you're doing?
What there's been so many surprises doing this. One of them is the incredible, touching feedback that I get from people. I get the most, sometimes I get the most amazing emails from people saying, I did not know there was a name for this. I thought I was the only one. Thank you. And I think the ones that moved me the most are the ones that said, you saved my life. And I'm just like, I didn't know what to do with that. But I also love that the sense of long-term survivors are finally coming into their own as a kind of force. Because in San Francisco, HIV and aging is all mixed in together with this. But in San Francisco, 63% of people living with HIV are over the age of 50.
Yeah, that's a remarkable statistic, which I don't think many people realize, right, in the city, right?
No. And then nationally, that statistic is 60% of people living with HIV are over 50.
Yeah.
Because in 2015 it was 50%, and by 2020 it'll be 70%. So aging is the new face of HIV.
Right,
and
right.
long-term survivors are not necessarily. If you seroconverted 2 years ago, what we have going on with our bodies and our psyches and everything is different, but we all fall under the rubric of the heading of aging with HIV. And I think that what I see a lot of is well-meaning organizations who have youth scholarship leadership programs, and they never have anything for elder programs. And that's one of the things I want to change, is because to say, in most cultures, especially not in America, but in cultures in general, elders are looked at as the leaders and teachers and, sages of
Yes, yes.
and yet we don't get rewarded the same way that the youth do, because youth is sexy, right? I mean, we all like youth people. Young is good, beautiful, but there's a lot that comes with aging with this thing, and it's the wisdom you gain. And I think a lot of people just need to get in touch with that.
Right, right. There's a few more questions I want to ask you, and I could go on and talk to you for like hours. You just inspire and thought provoking. Can you talk a little bit about Gary and your experience, and tell us about Gary?
I met Gary at the gym, and I think it was 1998, I believe. Yeah. And Gary was beautiful. He was sweet. We fell in love very quickly. We lived together for 2 years, and after about a year and a half, he started getting sick. We both HIV positive. I've been dating people who were negative. I broke up with the first boyfriend, and so I had a sort of brief in between boyfriend, but it wasn't very serious. So Gary was kind of my second live-in lover, and Gary got sick and really took a turn for the worse pretty quickly. However, he was sick for 8 or 9 months. I don't even know. It was a long time. And I was so physically, I've never been that physically exhausted. Because I was always at the hospital, always, trying to have, his doctor and my doctor were a friend. I mean, the same doctor. And I was an old friend with the doctor. It was a very intensive, emotional time. But I think what you're trying to talk about is Gary's last night, which when his family lives in LA, they came up to visit, and there was one by one coming in and seeing him. They were there a lot, like every day for the last few weeks. But I could see he was getting worse, and the doctor came in at one point to him and said, told me first, but he's like, he has lymphoma, and we can't treat it. So he went inside, talked to Gary, and then I went back inside after he came out, and Gary says, what does all this mean? And I says, well, sweetie, it means you are at the end of your life. And I want to do this however you want to do it. This is your life and your death. So we talked about that, and He wanted to come home. We couldn't do it because he was too ill. Broke my heart. But his last night on Earth, he, um, I was sitting alone with him in the hospital room at about 12 o'clock, from 11 o'clock to about 3 o'clock in the morning. But 11 o'clock, his family all leave, and I'll say goodbye, Gary. We'll see you tomorrow. And I remember thinking, no, you won't see him tomorrow. He's going to go tonight. And so I was sitting there, sort of holding his hand, talking to him, and at some point he opened his eyes. He'd been in and out of a coma for a week. He opened his eyes. He looked at me, and he said, "Do you know how much I love you?"
Hmm.
And I said, "Yeah, baby, I know. I love you too." And he closed his eyes. Those were his last words. And I spent the rest of the evening sitting right by his bed, holding his hand, telling him he was a caretaker. He was hanging on for his family for some reason, but he was really suffering. So I said, it's okay to go. Your mom will be okay. Your dad will be okay. I listed all his many brothers and sisters and his cousins and everybody I could mention. I'll be okay. It's time for you to go because you've suffered enough. And he did.
Wow. 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 Do people ask you about that often?
Um, it depends on if they know about Gary or not.
Yeah.
It's funny. I recently reconnected with Gary's niece, whom I hadn't seen since she was 10. She's now 30. Hard to believe. So we've been chatting back and forth about Uncle Gary a lot. So it's been fun.
How lovely.
Yeah, but no. Yeah, it is. She's coming to visit soon.
Wow. 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 Thank you for sharing that. Really. Thank you. Well,
Well, just follow up with that. What
yeah.
that did, is after years and years of trying to think, I got this dying thing, pretty much under control. I'm okay with dying. The moment that Gary died, and I felt this kind of energy, I was like, yeah, okay, now I get it. Now I'm okay, and it got me over my fear of death. Any residual fear of death that I had before Gary passed, right beside me, is gone.
I think being there at the moment when somebody passes is such a remarkable experience, right? I mean,
I
just
equate
as birth.
I was going to say, I equated it as being there for someone's birth.
Yeah.
They're very pure, completely in the moment experiences that are just kind of life changing.
Right. Right. It's deep, very deep. Be in the moment. We all strive to do that here, and we get often very distracted, right? It's
Yep.
fascinating. Um, so, a few more questions for you. What advice would you give to your younger self? Would you say?
Save money.
I know, right?
Oh, if there's one thing I could do, that would be it. I would also say, don't buy into what people are telling you about your life. Um, uh, I don't know. I wouldn't change much in my life. I mean, I made a few mistakes that I regret. Um, but I just look back on all of it and I think, whatever has brought me to this place. I have an amazing husband of 8 years. I have a cute little Labradoodle puppy we've had for a year and a half. I have good close friends. I have a community of people that I work with. And now it's expanded. I mean, I went to South Africa to the National AIDS Conference and did a poster on AIDS Survivor Syndrome. I met people there. I met people at other conferences. I have a huge online chat thing with a lot of amazing people. Many of them are my people, but this work, 8 or 9 thing, is you can't beat that. I'd love to get paid to do it because I'm doing it all as a volunteer right now. And I'm barely getting by on my disability check. But the reward comes when people say lovely things to you about how something you said or something they've read helped them.
Mm.
And it's the one thing I wanted to do is I wanted to be able to give people hope and give people a sense of let's set new goals, because the old goals that we set back in those days, they're not serving us now. Let's start setting some new goals. Let's focus on the fact that we're resilient, for instance.
Yes, vitality.
Yes, well, because I learned, I used to have a misconception about resilience. I thought it was something you either had or you didn't have. You were born with it or you weren't. And what I learned is that it's something that you learn. You fall down enough times, you get up again. And then if you stop focusing on all the times you fell down and start focusing on the fact that, but I got back up, that changes your mindset. And so it went from, God, there must be something about me resilient to, I might be resilient to, I am resilient to, I am resilient. I mean, it became this kind of mantra for me. And that's one of the things I want to try and teach the world because, the sum of our experiences and our life journeys have taken us to a place where we're pretty exceptional people. All of us. I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about everybody. Because we lived through the historically unique epidemic. We survived. Despite everything, with all the damage and the wound and all the loss and multiple casualties, we survived. What are we doing with that? Is it just enough to get by? I don't think so.
Right.
It's enough to help other people, even if it's helping the blind guy across the street when he's trying to learn to use his cane and say, "Okay, the lights changed. Follow me." Just any little thing that takes you out of yourself and has you helping someone else helps you more than anything you can do or buy.
That is so true. That is so true. Wow. So what are you excited about next?
Well, this whole theory of mind wave survivor syndrome has been researched by the University of Pittsburgh. Ron Stahl, who is an old friend, but also a very well-respected, regarded researcher in HIV field, he has done a study of AIDS survivor syndrome. And he called me on my birthday in April this year to tell me, he's like, "Are you sitting down?" He told me what he found. And I was just started to cry because it seems like it's real. I mean, I can't divulge too much because he's coming to San Francisco on November the 3rd to present to a town hall. We're going to videotape it and tell us all what he has discovered. So the idea that he's going to eventually write this up in a medical journal and it's going to get the kind of attention it needs. It's already sort of started a floodgate opening of people contacting me. So I know that something is shifting in the in the atmosphere. Sorry. So that's what I'm excited about now. I'm also excited about the idea of a program that I'm working on called HIV Resilient, which is a 10 or 12 week program, different aspects to it. It's too long and boring to go into. But it's about teaching people resiliency skills and helping them rewrite their story from that of all the loss and all the tragedy and all the pain and all the suffering to one of saying the hero's journey. How did that change you? How did all that past experience make you into a better person and give you a better sense of meaning and purpose?
Right. Wow. Congratulations on that.
Yeah.
Both of those things sound absolutely amazing. So, folks, look at the bottom of your screen after we sign off, and you'll find out more information about Tez Anderson. Tez, thank you so much for being a part of this and sharing your candid insights about so much. Really, thank you. And thank you for all you do.
Well, thank you, Art Greg. It was really lovely to meet you, even on Skype.
Yes.
It's good.
Yeah, it's great to connect with you. All right, folks, stay tuned for another episode next week of Mystics in the Chat Room, Conversations with Agents of Change. Thanks for tuning in. Email us, find us on Facebook, like us, and have an amazing week. Until next time, ciao.